All right. Well, thanks for coming out. I know everyone has a busy day, and now you get to sit through more stuff from some guy. You're like, who the heck is this? Yeah, my name's Dan Wallin. I live in Chandler, Arizona, which is right outside of Phoenix. First time in Omaha. Nice place. I like it, actually. It was a little rainy yesterday, but today's pretty awesome. Going to hit, hopefully, College World Series, it looks like, tomorrow, so it was good timing. But yeah, I'm actually excited to be here. I've been working with everybody here, and I have to say this. I go to the East Coast a lot, and some of you are from the East Coast, but people here are just nicer. Come on, you got to agree. People here are just nice. So I called my wife. I'm like, man, everyone here's so nice. And she's like, it's the Midwest. They're all nice, So anyway, so yeah, I run a consulting company out there and do a lot. We're doing some training, Angular and JavaScript and whatever else we decide to do this week here. And tonight, though, we're going to talk a little bit about TypeScript. Anyone using TypeScript at all? Anybody? Got one of these? That counts, sort of. All right. Your dad got you using TypeScript yet? Come on, you got to get on this. This is something they should have taught in 3rd grade. All right, so I don't have actually a lot of slides. I'm going to walk you through just really what is TypeScript, why should you, I think, consider looking at it. If you don't look at this, you definitely should look at ES6, ECMAScript 6, the next version of JavaScript. Has anybody played with ES6 at all in here? Okay, we got a big, maybe one or two, yeah. By far the most significant upgrade of JavaScript that the world has ever seen. JavaScript was written in like 10 days. We were talking about this yesterday here. And while they've added a lot of cool features with ECMAScript 3 and 5, and now 6 will be coming out, 6 is by far the biggest feature set. Why, what's that have to do with TypeScript? Well, because you're going to see TypeScript is based on, it's a superset of JavaScript. And so if you want to start leveraging some of these features today, whether it's on a Mac or Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter, works everywhere. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about, is the benefits that you get out of this and what you can do with it. A friend of mine named Andrew Connell, anyone do SharePoint in here by chance? You might have heard of Andrew. He's very well known in the world. So Andrew and I did a project for Microsoft right before the Build conference, actually. And then we gave a talk on this project. And it's the first bigger project that I've done where we used TypeScript. And after that, we both, we got done and we kind of had everything was over Skype because he lives in Florida and I live in Arizona. And we got done and I'm like, so what do you think? He's like, dude, that was awesome. And I was like, I know it was, wasn't it? It was so much better than what I've done before. And so we'll kind of talk about it. The beauty of all this is that, number one, it's very easy to get started with. I'm assuming most of you do C# here, probably. C#, okay. COBOL, it's really close to COBOL, so no. So anyway, we'll talk about it. I blog a lot about this stuff, so there's my blog if you're interested. If you're on Twitter, feel free to get in touch that way. Another friend of mine, John Papa, who a lot of you probably have heard of, we got started with TypeScript about 2 years ago. And we did a course for Pluralsight and all this fun stuff, and we were kind of disappointed because nobody cared. And now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, TypeScript. We're like, yeah, that's like 2 years old, But anyway, it's fun stuff. I really like it, and I'll explain why here as we jump on in. All right, so the agenda here, I actually had no slides about an hour ago, and I'm like, I should be a little more organized. So I grabbed this 5-minute talk thing I had to do at Build a month ago or whatever, and then just added a little. But most of what I'm going to show you is just the basics of how to get started. Then I have 2 GitHub projects that you're welcome to take a look at if you want some actual projects that run. Both are Angular. So is anyone doing AngularJS in here at all? A lot of you. Awesome. Awesome. That's what we're doing this week, right, guys? We're having just tons of fun. They're barely staying awake, but at least they're there. So, so what we're going to do is talk about, first off, what is TypeScript? And you're going to see it's just a superset of JavaScript, which is really cool. You're going to see why as we go through. We're going to talk a little bit about type support. And this is, it is called TypeScript for a reason. but we're going to talk about why the types can actually save you a lot of grief. If you're on a small scale project, I'd argue that this is still nice, but maybe not as essential as some of you might be on a really large scale project right now. And JavaScript with its awesome compiler will tell you exactly what's wrong, right? And I can tell most of you do JavaScript, so because you know what I'm talking about. We run it, we Control-Shift-I into the Chrome Developer Tools, and that starts the fun of debugging, typically. It's also very modular. So one of the nice things about TypeScript is if you're doing Node.js. Anyone doing Node in here? I know it's a .NET user group, but a little bit, okay. Then Node uses what's called CommonJS to load up modules. You can almost think of a module almost like a namespace, sort of. And then anyone use Require.js in here? Okay, so a few of you. Require.js is used in the browser to dynamically load scripts up. Well, TypeScript supports both of those techniques, and with 1.5, which isn't officially out yet, but it's coming, they're going to support the new ECMAScript 6 module syntax, which is what, for those that raise their hand doing Angular, you'll probably know that the Angular team is building the next version in TypeScript, which is pretty dang cool that like Google and Microsoft actually talked. But, it's like, when is the last time that happened? It's very open. In fact, I was kind of lucky. There's anyone heard of edX? It's a really new thing from Microsoft. edX, they have all these courses, and I did a new course, and I show up, and I actually asked them, I go, well, hey, can we get this guy? And they're like, no, there's no way. Well, I show up, and he's there, and it's Anders Hejlsberg, who wrote, C#. Well, he also wrote TypeScript, along with every other language that's been reasonably cool over the last, 30 years. And one of the things so we did this little video interview thing, and it was pretty cool before he went to his house in Hawaii. I actually invited him to an event. He's like, oh yeah, I was surprised. He goes, I'd love to do that. And he goes, when is it? He goes, I said June. He goes, oh no, going to be in Hawaii. So rough life. Super cool guy, but he really emphasized how, they want people to realize that although it is from Microsoft, the old, Microsoft kind of stigma still haunts them some, that it's very, very open. And I think they're now showing that with the reason Angular decided to go with TypeScript was because the team, including Anders, was very open to making changes to the language to accommodate what they wanted. So, pretty cool. I mean, they've actually met, I don't know how exactly many times, but I know they met at least 4 times over the last 8 months in person, rather than just calling, flew down, met with the team, and that's pretty cool. So very, very open. And then tool support is actually pretty dang awesome. If you're doing Visual Studio, it's really awesome, which I'm going to show you that coming up. But I'm also going to show you on the Mac side an Angular app that's kind of a Angular in 20, I call it in 20-ish minutes, but it's TypeScript based. And I'm going to show you the basics of, for those who have done Angular, how do you do a module in TypeScript? How do you do a directive in TypeScript? How do you do a controller in TypeScript? Service in TypeScript, that type of stuff. So that by the time you leave tonight, which will be done, what'd you guys say I have till midnight, was it? Something like that? 1. 1 at the latest. I mean, what's her bedtime, 2? So, okay, so let's jump on in here. So what is TypeScript? Well, if you go to their website, this is kind of the quote they've had for a while. I actually haven't looked recently, but I think it's still there. It's a typed superset of JavaScript and blah, blah, blah. Now it compiles to JavaScript. Why is that cool? Well, has anyone done CoffeeScript in here by chance? Okay. So CoffeeScript, you guys that raise your hand, it's its own language, right? But then it can generate JavaScript. There's a lot of people are like, oh, they're the same. No, they're not the same at all. TypeScript is actually based on JavaScript. It's not a superset. It's not a superset. It's not its own language. It is a superset. And so one of the nice things is I can literally take an ECMAScript 5 app, which is probably what most of us are writing right, as of today, plug in one of those functions, variables, whatever, and it just works. I can literally put that in a .ts file that you're going to see those coming up, and it just works out of the box. That's my deciding factor if I was going to use this at all, was can I take existing code not rewrite the whole freaking thing because it's a totally different language, and just plug it in. And if I can, okay, then I like that. That's pretty cool. So you're going to see as we move along here with some of the features and things that it has a lot of cool features. Namely, it supports JavaScript script code. I told you I threw these in really last minute from another deck I had. So I was just going to jump right into code. It does provide type support. Now, it's not a ton of support. You get number, string, Boolean, array. Those are the types you get. But how many use interfaces in your C# apps at all? You can write your own custom interfaces. Now that is where it gets, I think, awesome. Because how many of you have called into a JavaScript function that takes, let's say it takes like a settings object, and you're like, wonder what I passed, because the docs are just awesome. And so you kind of start guessing, or you read the source or whatever. Well, with TypeScript, especially if you're in Visual Studio, you'll actually get IntelliSense against the properties of that object. And if you're writing the code, you can actually write an interface. Now you'll see as we jump into this, the interface never shows up in the generated code. It's just used during design time or typing time, whatever you want to call it. All right, so encapsulation also can be done through classes and modules. I'm going to be talking about that quite a bit coming up. I didn't realize these wrap, but oh well. Support for constructors, properties, methods, functions, you'll see, and they're much more concise. And then you can even do interfaces. All right, how many like lambdas? Full lambda support? They don't call it that. They call it fat arrow syntax. Personally, I think that's kind of offensive, but anyway, that's what they call it. So, and then you get very good IntelliSense with that. So let's take a look, and then I'll jump in here. All right, the code on the left, hopefully, I don't know that you can see that well, so let's zoom that a bit. There we go, that's better. All right, the code right here is TypeScript code. So just take a sec and kind of look through this. Very simple. First off, you'll notice that we can do classes. And it was funny, so I bring in this slide deck to this thing that Anders was at up at Microsoft, their studios there. And he goes, well, let me see. And no pressure on my part. The guy that wrote the language wants to see your slides. And he goes, oh, well, this is really good, but, because he has a little, I think he's from, where's he from, Denmark or something like that. So he's got a little accent. And he goes, oh, no, we got to change something. I'm like, oh, okay, what am I going to say? No. And he goes, we got to make people know, let people know that it's not all about classes, that if they want to do functional programming, they can still do that. So we added a thing on that. So although classes are part of ES6, which is where TypeScript gets all of its kind of foundation from, again, functions, if you've done the patterns that are out there, prototype pattern, in fact, we did these yesterday. Why don't you guys come on up and tell us about the patterns? We'll see how good I taught you. Prototype pattern, revealing module pattern, those type of things, where you're using functions for everything. You can still do that with TypeScript. You don't have to use classes. I've heard plenty of people kind of whine about, oh, I don't want to use classes in JavaScript, which, okay, whatever. I like them, but whatever you want. The foundation of this is still JavaScript, though. So if you look at this and go, hey, I don't want classes, okay, cool. Use what you do today. You'll still get benefits that I'm going to show you, like ES6 features, typing support, all this good stuff. So let's talk about typing support. Notice greeting is a string. And notice that we assign message, which gets passed into the constructor, and that's actually a keyword from ES6. None of this is TypeScript keywords, at least in this slide. That constructor, when you new up the greeting, we're going to pass in the message. Well, if you pass just a number, without the quotes, if you're in an editor like Visual Studio Code, and some others, you'll actually see that it'll give you an error. And we're going to go to the TypeScript playground here in a sec, and we'll kind of play around with this. Try that in normal JavaScript. That's kind of the fun, I think, of JavaScript, is you never know. Because 1 equals 1 that's quoted, right? In JavaScript, if you do the double equals. So this will catch that kind of stuff. Now we're going to take that message and assign it right to this greeting property that you see, this.greeting there. And then if they call the greet function, which you might notice if you do a lot of JavaScript is totally different. There's no function keyword. It's very kind of succinct nowadays. then that's what we'll be doing there, is calling greet, and then you'll notice we're going to return this dot greeting. Now what happens, because, does anybody still have to support IE8 and love it? Not a whole lot. Good. That's good to hear. IE9 still? IE10? Okay. Any of these, this isn't going to work, right? Now IE11 is starting to support some of this. The Edge actually, oddly enough, every time I say the Edge, I keep thinking of U2, But the Edge browser, what was Spartan, the next one, it actually, if you go look at some tables of compatibility out there, it's one of the leading browsers for ECMAScript 6, which is actually pretty cool. But anyway, I digress. This code right here is not going to run so well. All right, so what we're going to end up having to do is convert this into JavaScript. And TypeScript right now supports 3 output modes: ECMAScript 3, ECMAScript 5, and ECMAScript 6. Now, the ECMAScript 6 isn't quite what you think. It doesn't right now actually officially do ECMAScript 6, but it will once enough browsers support it. But that's their plan anyway, is they'll take out the types, since ECMAScript 6 doesn't support that, and they'll just convert your code over to JavaScript. So this is actually a little summary here of what the JavaScript would look like once you run it through this compiler. It's called tsc.exe, TypeScript compiler. Now, the good news is, if you're going, oh, I got a compiler now, well, the good news is you have a compiler now. So that means that your types and errors that you have are going to be caught. The other good news is you don't have to use the compiler. If you're in Visual Studio, you could just type your .ts files, save them, and by default, it'll automatically do the compilation for you, which is actually very cool. How many use JavaScript tools? Grunt, Gulp, Broccoli, one of those, Captain Crunch. No, I made that one up. But these tools can also automate the process of converting TypeScript down to JavaScript. So, I run a lot on Mac and I run a lot on Windows. I live in both worlds a lot now. And so if I'm on my Mac, I can just automate the process. If I'm on Windows, I'm typically using Visual Studio there, and it'll do it for me. So I can have my cake and eat it too. If anyone run Linux at all? VMs or anything? All right, not many. Well, you could run this there too. So it's pretty cool. So let me show you, let's jump out here. Yes? Does Visual Studio Code do that automatically? So right now it can be set up to do it, yes. There's actually a blog post by Jonathan Turner. I'd have to look it up, but it's on the MSDN blog site. Okay. And the question was, does Visual Studio Code do this? It can. Now it's in, the version's very high. It's 0.3. So there's still a lot to come on that. But under the covers, Visual Studio Code, any wild guesses what it's using? TypeScript. Well, yeah, and it's using actually the same engine that GitHub did for their editor, Atom editor. It's called Electron now, actually. It's using a browser. It's not necessarily Chrome per se, but it's under the covers, it's using a browser. But anyway, getting back to it, yes, you can do it. It is actually, if you're building a Node app, for instance, in Visual Studio Code, it's actually using TypeScript under the covers. That's how they can give you good IntelliSense. So with a little work on your part, you can get awesome IntelliSense. Anybody tried Visual Studio Code in here? Not that many. You should try it. It's, I'll tell you why I like it. If you right-click on a file, you just want to look real quick, and you do the open with. It drives me crazy when it takes more than 2 milliseconds to open. I'm such a patient person. So it's almost like Notepad. It just, boom, just pops up, at least on a Mac. I haven't tried it actually on Windows, but I use it on, I have it here on my Mac side. Right there, you'll see the visual. I mean, how freaky is that? That there's a Visual Studio icon on the Mac side. All right.
Scott Hanselman just did a real good blog post
on code. Yeah, and John has a really good series, actually. So if you're interested, you can go to johnpapa.net, I think, something like that. He has a whole series on it as well. So I haven't seen Scott's. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it just came out.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about types, and then we'll jump into some code here and show you how it works. So these are your basic types you get. So first off, you'll notice, is anyone done ActionScript in here by chance? It almost kind of looks like that, right? A little bit. you'll notice we have a var age, but normally we stop there in JavaScript. But now we're going to say colon number. So for those that used to do dim I as integer, it's almost back to that. And now, I did VB way back in the day, and then C# came out, and I had to learn to reverse everything, and now it's back to reversing, and I call it language dyslexia because you work in too many languages. But anyway, so colon number is basically going to make the TypeScript compiler enforce that these are numbers. Now notice rating, the third one down. This will use type inference under the covers, and it'll automatically assume that, oh, this must be a number type of scenario. Moving on down, you have Booleans. All right, there's a bool right there. It also does type inference. Of course, you have strings, very common, arrays. And then my favorite, any. This is, you can mark it as any to basically tell the compiler, I don't care what you pass it. You can pass anything. So
once it's done a type inference, will it enforce that the rest of the way through?
It's for that variable.
Okay.
For that variable. So as long as you pass that variable around, yeah, it'll figure it out. But you normally don't do that. The whole purpose of using this is you'll type it. But it's just to kind of show you that it's smart, and it'll figure out that, okay, I guess that's a Boolean. Now later, if you try to assign something, you can get errors, like a string, because it can't convert it. So, all right. So how many have been to the TypeScript playground? Anybody? A few of you. All right. So the way you get info on TypeScript is you go to typescriptlang.org right here. And typescriptlang.org is where you can get info on the docs. They actually have some pretty good docs. Let me actually run in there real fast. So if you go into Learn, they do have a tutorial. You can walk through it. They have some demos here. But what's really useful is the handbook. I actually refer to this every now and then because there's sometimes I don't use a feature that much. So if you jump on into here, I'm going to show you classes in just a sec, but they have some pretty good docs. They have sample code, and you can walk through it and see how to do inheritance and all that fun stuff. All right? But my favorite thing is a great way to learn TypeScript is to go to the playground. So the first thing we're going to do is just a real simple demo here. And let's say, name equals Ted. And then let's make a function. And let's call it, I don't know, show name or something like that. But what I'm going to do is instead of just passing in some, X for the name and leave it at that, which means pretty much takes anything. That's kind of like doing X any. I'm going to come in and do string, or actually let's do number. I know it's show name, but let's just see what happens here. Okay, and we could do a very sophisticated alert. Let's come on down from there, and let's now call show name, and we'll pass in name, and let's see what happens here. So instantly, notice it went red, and you might wonder, how the heck is it giving me this help as I type? The TypeScript compiler is also JavaScript. So you can actually take this and run it anywhere and compile this TypeScript code. So it's actually pretty cool. If I mouse over it, kind of let you guys look at that. Argument of type string is not assignable to a parameter of type number. Now obviously if it's show name it wouldn't be, but this is cool because if you're on a small scale app you may say, who cares, easy to catch. But how many are working on some large apps right now? And how cool would it be to be told, nope, you screwed up, or they screwed up, better yet. It wasn't me. I was telling these guys today, there's a company in Kansas City called Epic Systems. They have one of the larger apps I've seen recently in the last year. It's almost 100,000 lines of JavaScript. And they're a legal software company. Well, you can imagine when you get 100,000 lines, little things like this are kind of a big deal to catch up front, right? Because otherwise you get down the road, you didn't write a test for that particular aspect, so let's hope the user acceptance testing catches it. And you know how that goes, right? They didn't have time, so. So let's change it. Let's change this to a string. And now you know it's okay, and then I know y'all want to see, because this is a phenomenal app, and I'll show you the JavaScript, but they even have this run button. Oh yeah. Now we're coding TypeScript. You too can show alert. Now let's look over at the right though. All right, so by default, it will compile it down to ECMAScript 5. You can actually switch that when we get to Visual Studio. I'll show you the properties. Remind me I said that so I don't forget, because there's some important properties you can do. But you'll notice that it looks exactly like my code. They just happen to strip out the types because, JavaScript doesn't know what to do. Pretty cool. Not that impressive though, right, at this point. Yeah, we have type support. Okay. Let's convert this. Let's take it up a notch. And instead of doing this, let me zoom this. Is that good for the back row? You guys see that all right? Okay. I can go bigger. How about now? Let's do a class. Let's call it person. And let's come on in here and do a name that's a string. And now I'm going to add a constructor that allows me to pass in the name that's a string. And then we're going to say this.name, that's how I get up to that field in the top, equals the name I passed into the constructor. Then we can come down and make show name. Now I'm not going to pass anything in here because we already have it. And now I'll just do an alert again to keep it simple, right here. Okay, so now we have a class called person. We have, in essence, a field in the C# world at the top, a variable. ES6, by the way, doesn't support that. In ES6 right now, you have to initialize through the constructor. So in ES6, it would actually look like that. But TypeScript does allow definitions at the top of your variables. All right, so now we have a constructor. Now I know most of us are used to this if you do C#, right, as your constructor. So, Christian?
You said that it,
He's famous, that's how I know him. No.
you said that it doesn't have to have, will it allow you to do it through the constructor to define your properties as well?
That in ES6, that's how you have to do it.
Right, in TypeScript, can you?
Yeah, yeah, you could do it that way too. There's a slightly different thing I would do though to make it happen. But oh, well, are you saying, so let me comment this out. Right here you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, now this guy assumes name was already defined. Okay, so TypeScript is different that way. Okay, I see I was thinking something else. Yeah, you'll see right away it's going, let me show you the error. Property name does not exist. And this is the basic property right now. Now later I'll show you can also do get set properties. But yeah, that part's different. In ECMAScript 6 though, you would just do that and then this will work absolutely fine. And that's kind of how it works. I like the TypeScript way because I kind of like defining it up top anyway. But again, it's just how it works. Okay, so let's take this out and let's look at the code that was generated so far. So I'm going to go over here to the right. Now take a sec and look through that. Okay, so we have our function person, that's our constructor, right? We have a prototype here on person. Well, that's actually new. They didn't used to do it that way. So that's slightly...
You changed it from the constructor keyword to person.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, that is new. I forgot I changed it. I was looking at it going, that's not what I'm expecting. Okay, so let's change that back. Yeah, what I did there is not valid. It would think that's a function named person. So that's what I was expecting. Okay. I was going, why are they putting that in the prototype? That doesn't even make sense. Okay, so there's our constructor at the top. And we have this.name equals the name passed in. Notice they're being very efficient on show name. If you're not familiar with prototyping, talk to one of these guys. They're experts now. We just did that yesterday. Prototyping in a nutshell, show name is only going to be available in memory once, and it's shared across all instances of person. So it's very, very efficient. And so you can see they're shooting for efficiency. And then they have an IFI, the line 9 there, if you're not familiar, that's an immediately invoked function. So we're going to invoke that whole chunk as an object and assign it to person. That would be the equivalent, or one way, that we would write it today. This is kind of what we call the prototype pattern right here. But it's cool because right off the bat, even with a simple example, there's efficiencies built in. And if you study their code, it's pretty dang efficient. We were talking the other day about, anyone use any framework in here? Anyone ever looked at the SQL that gets generated. Yeah. What's that?
That's some good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it is pretty good, actually, right? But I actually love any framework, by the way. I'm a fan of it, and it's the same here. It's actually pretty good stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you can shoot yourself in the foot because I can with that too, but it works pretty well. So now there won't be anything to run here because we didn't do anything. So now we can come down and say person equals new person, pass in whatever. Like so, see what it generated. Okay, what you would expect. Normal JavaScript there. All right, so now we could, let me actually zoom that again. Come on in and say person dot, and notice that the name property shows up, and we get the show name property showing up. So let's do show name, and again, that just does an alert, so it's very basic. All right, pretty cool though. All right, so let's just run that because it's very sophisticated and we get the name and everything works as you would expect there. All right, so now we'll, if you have any questions, shoot away, but we've seen now some typing support. You know, I could have done number, I could do an array, I can do Boolean. In a second, I'm going to show you we can do interfaces, which is actually very cool, I think. But any questions so far? Yes, sir.
Constellation is hiding your data. Is it possible to make that a private?
It is. It is. Now, in JavaScript, it won't be because they don't support that.
Understood.
But we can, here, actually use that keyword. And same thing on your functions and things. You can do that. Yeah, so
Does that actually hide it?
in TypeScript, it does.
Okay.
No.
So
It has nothing to do with JavaScript. It's purely as you code and I hit yours. If you're TypeScript, I'm TypeScript. I won't be able to see it. But if you look at the compiled, JavaScript, technically you can still get to stuff. Now they'll let's actually see what gets generated here. So let's do a private. All right, so there's our property, right? Let's come on over here. Yeah, looks the same. Now we can come over here, show name. Let's add a private there. See how TypeScript went red? And that's because in the TypeScript world they're going, can't do that. But over here, notice, show name. It's on the prototype here. We can still call it. It still works even. Because this is a design time, as you type thing. So question in the back.
There's also a different syntax in the constructor where you can put private.
There is. There is. If you're feeling lazy, you don't want to do that or that, you can either mark this guy as private. That automatically generates the field/property for you. Very cool. Or you can mark it as public, and now name is publicly accessible from outside the class. That one's good, but there's a little tribal knowledge going on there because if you don't know what's going on, you won't realize what you just said. So, yep, that's another thing you can do. I'll have to admit, I do like that. In fact, one of the apps that's on GitHub, I'll give you a link to, we use that. I do kind of, if it's my custom properties, I kind of prefer this because I can see it. But, to each their own. If I'm using like Angular objects, I'm way too lazy to type those out, and I'll use the public or private on those. I'll show you that in a sec here, but let's do name string. Okay. Now, obviously, if I change this, to a number, we just broke it, and this is what you would get now when you build. You would get a build error because it's going to say, whoa, what are you doing? You can't pass a string into that property that's a number type. Pretty cool. All right. Now, my favorite part of this, so a little story which I shared with everybody that works here. So I have a friend that works at Intel, and his name's Jay. And Jay, almost 2 years ago, made the decision that his team was moving to TypeScript. And so we came in just for some kind of architectural type stuff for about 3 days or so. And at the time, he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's brand new. It's hard to say. I don't want my name. Like Dan said, this will work perfectly. At risk of Intel, their fab crashing or something. But and so I was kind of like, hey, I like it, but I don't know at this point. Well, let's just suffice it to say they've been doing this now for 2 years. And I don't talk to him that often, but maybe every 6 months we'll email. And he, well, I emailed him actually after the announcement at NGConf about Angular using TypeScript. And I was like, man, you're like prophetic. Because now they have code that literally is 2 years old that is more modern than probably any code that any of you are writing in this room, but they wrote it 2 years ago. You know, because they're literally writing ECMAScript 6 2 years ago. And that's kind of cool, actually. So, all right. And me too, by the way, because I wasn't using it 2 years ago that much in a real project. So, all right, so let me take the private off. Yeah, otherwise I'm going to be doing it again going, that should work, you know. Okay. Any questions on so far on the class? How we doing there?
When you implicitly declared your variable down here, does it get the type person? Like the var person 14.
Oh, yeah. So this is implicit.
Yeah.
I was lazy. But we could have done this and been explicit. Yep. Now I've created a custom type, and absolutely we can do that. Yep.
But it is implicitly,
It is implicitly figured out. That's right.
so if you later on said person equals 5, it would complain.
That's right. That's
More
right.
like a C# var than a JavaScript var.
Yeah, it's more like a C# var. It's a type inference var. It's not a variant. It's not a, you know, it's totally solid. Yeah. Okay, well, let's take it a step further here. Yes, sorry.
Told it's all public, is going to be all public versus private, or
Yeah, so by default, you'll notice here, I can call, you know, show name outside. But you probably saw when I put private, see how it goes red there? Yeah, that's everything's public by default.
does it have a protected?
No, at least not yet. That's not to say they won't add it though. That's the cool thing about the language. They can extend it, and as long as they generate JavaScript, we don't care. So, pretty cool. Good question. All right, but there's more. If you call in the next 30 seconds, I'll show you I can even do inheritance. So let's say that we make a class called employee. Oh, sorry, that's C#. That's not right. That was a Freudian slip. It's extends. Person. Yeah. That was language dyslexia kicking in. So yeah, employee extends person. Well, now I can do this. I can make a constructor. And let's say that, and I almost did it again. I almost did this. But anyway, backwards. Come on. String. Okay, now I don't want to have to redefine the name again, right? So what I can do is just call super. Anyone done Java? That was kind of like a direct steal right there, but it's not, because that's how ECMAScript 6 is actually going to do it. So it's actually a steal from ECMAScript 6, which they are doing on purpose. And the constructor there, in fact, we should get IntelliSense. Yeah, see how it says pass a name, which is a string? Well, I can just forward that up because we're inheriting. And now I don't have to retype the property. I'm inheriting. What else would I get? Well, let's try it. Let's change this here to employee. And notice now when I do person, I know it's employee, but notice name and show name are coming. So just like you can do in C#, you can do the whole extension concept or derived class. Now, same thing? No, totally different. Let's go look at what it does. Let me go back to show name here. That's bugging me. Hold on. Let's call that imp or something so we can know the difference. Okay, now I feel better. Let's go over here now. Now, this gets a little bigger. Don't let it frighten you, though. You would have to write this anyway at some point. Here's our person. You've already seen that code. Take a look at our employee, though. Now, notice how they made in the function here a little underscore super, which, of course, represents the base class. And notice in the IFI, the immediately invoked function, you pass in the person up into there. And then what's it do with it? Well, this is the magic right here. Okay, so a lot of people go, oh, cool, it's like a whole new way of doing inheritance in JavaScript. No, it's not. It's still using prototyping. All right, here's all they're doing. they're passing in the derived class, that's what D is. The base class, that's what, or D is derived, B is base. Checking some properties, but this is the magic right here. They're kind of creating this little weird name function, which is underscore underscore function. They're assigning the base class's prototype to the prototype of the function, and then assigning to the derived class prototype a new instance of this. Anyone done object.create in JavaScript? Anyone using that? Pretty, yeah. Kristen's like, yeah. For those that didn't raise your hand, that's one way you can kind of do this prototypal or prototypal, it depends on who you talk to. Prototypal inheritance, we call it. All right, and so you'll see that under the covers, it's just prototypes, normal JavaScript prototypes. There is no magic. A lot of people think that ECMAScript 6 is like this whole new language. No, it literally is syntactic sugar on top of what we already have today. And that's not a bad thing, because prototyping in JavaScript is extremely efficient. So it's not like they needed to rewrite all that. I think this is a heck of a lot easier to understand than prototyping. I don't know, does anyone else get a little miffed or confused by prototyping ever? Everyone has a perfect understanding, right? I mean, I know it pretty well, I think, but on a given day, I feel like an idiot. You know, it's like, why isn't this working right? So I really like the new syntax compared to what we used to have to do right here. That's kind of how you would traditionally do it. All right, so that's another feature that I think is very, very cool with, you know, migrating your JavaScript code over is now, I don't know, what would you rather maintain, that stuff on the right or the stuff right here? I think this is pretty easy. All right, any questions on the extends there before we move on here? All right, everybody staying awake? I know it's getting time for bedtime here for some of us. Me. All right, let's do something else here. Let's say that in addition to passing a name for the employee, you can also pass, what else do we want to pass? Employee ID, maybe? Something like that? That'd probably be first, so let's do that. So ID number, all right, and then we need a place. You'll notice it already caught that, whoa, you screwed up. Not enough parameters, so let's just hard code employee 1. Okay, now what's the trick, by the way, if I'm too lazy to write out the property? Public or private. I'm going to say we want to get to it. Okay, now that's going to generate, now on employee, notice I have an ID property now. That's pretty cool. So it generates all the code for you. Let's go out one level. Let's not do that, though. All right, let's fix this up. Well, let me do this to be explicit. And let me make the property here. We'll pass in ID like this. And now I need to do ID number like that. Okay, so that's kind of what we did before. Yes?
Is there a way to define a variable as immutable? Like you can only assign it once?
No, they don't have an immutable type. You could always do...
Like a constant sort of variable.
You can do const.
Like read only in C#.
Yeah, actually. You could assign it like in the constructor, and then it'll only be assigned once. Kind of like you can do a read-only field in C#. There is a const you can add. That's new.
When you had the parameter marked as public ID : number,
Mm-hmm.
and then you were also assigning it in the constructor, I expected it to flag that as an error.
Yeah, and it didn't, did it? No. So, who knows? Visual Studio might have, though, because this is like the web one. This is pretty accurate, though. Yeah, you could. The only thing...
It's going to flag it as read only.
Right.
Making it a public flag.
Because you already defined it. Yeah, so you could do a const, and that can be assigned a value through... It's almost like a read-only field. It's a brand new feature. Well, it's not brand new. It's been out. It came out with TypeScript 1.4, and that is an option. Actually, you could do that. In fact, that off the top of my head, that's your closest option that I can think of. I have yet to see them introduce a read-only keyword. Who knows? Okay, I didn't think so, but never know. But anyway, you could do a const in that case because it's a little bit different than we're used to with a const. A const is almost like a read-only that you can assign to once. and then from then on it's done. It's baked, you know. So ES6, that's a feature of ES6, by the way, that you can do. So, okay, what was I going to show? Oh, yeah. So how many have constructors that take, you know, a lot of parameter data? A lot of us, right? So what do you usually do to simplify it? Because let's say this was 25 things. Probably pass an object, right? Okay. So I could make a class, you know, like a settings class or something like that, or I could do something like this. I can make an interface called, let's call it iSettings. And then in here, I can actually define what are the members of the interface. Now, this is something you're going to see has nothing to do with JavaScript at all. This is purely design time as you code. But let's go ahead and say that we have an ID number. And we have, what do we have? Name string. Like that. All right, that would be my interface. Okay. Now, I'm actually trying to remember. I'm trying to think when the last time I did it extends implements. Because let me see if I can get the right order. I might have this wrong on the order here. Nope. Okay. I was thinking that was what it was, but I've done it, but it's like I didn't prepare that one. Okay, so what I'm doing is saying employee extends person. So kind of like in C#, you always put the base class first, but in C# you put a comma, you know, interface. In here they have this keyword implements. Now this whole thing here and here is not part of ES6. This is custom to TypeScript. This is absolutely one of my favorite features though, because now what I can do is come into here and do settings, iSettings, and then, you know, this would be settings dot name and settings.id. And, you know, how much cleaner is that? Now this is all messed up. So what do we do here? Any ideas? Pass an object literal, pass an object. So yeah, we're going to do ID, one, name. In fact, it even gave me IntelliSense, you can see there, which is pretty cool. Name, whatever, Ted or something like that. So now we're all fixed up. Now this is a very simple example, obviously, but this is how a class can actually implement an interface, but you don't have to necessarily implement an interface. In fact, I just wanted to show you, do I need that? No, because I'm not actually, well, I am implementing it, but I don't need it. I really just want to be able to define a custom data type. So I said you only have string, number, Boolean, array, and that's it. But you can make classes and you can make interfaces, so now the sky's the limit as far as the data types that you might create. That is one of my favorite features right there. That has saved me enormous grief over the years as we've done some stuff, especially over the last like 3 months as we did this project for Microsoft. Because now as I type, and Andrew and I were both working on this and checking into a Git repository. There's a little behind the scenes on that one, but anyway. And so it made it really easy that his stuff can merge nicely with my stuff. So question, her or you?
Me.
All right.
So in C#, if you're missing one of the properties, it would throw an error. Will this do this again?
It will. Good question. But,
You got like name.ted.
yep. Yeah, this will, right now, these are required. Excellent question. So see how it goes red? What I can do, though, and probably it'd be a bad idea with an employee, but we'll do it. Optional. I know. That's why I'm telling you. You'll see this and go, dang, this is freaking cool. You know, I'm writing JavaScript. Look, Mom. So anyway, that's what you do, is you can make it optional, which is actually pretty common because, you know, a lot of times with JavaScript, you might have 10 settings, but you only need 2 of them. So a lot of times I will mark my interface things optional. If it's a class level interface where I do the implements, then typically they're not as optional, more standard C#. But when I'm doing something like this, where I'm just making a custom settings, then oftentimes I'll make them optional. Now this one, I'm going to go back, and we're going to make them required. But yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I probably wouldn't have brought that up otherwise. So cool, good question. Do you have any questions? You're good to go. She's taking notes. Look at that. Thanks for coming. All right. Yes, sir.
Can you define functions in an interface?
Can you define function? Yes, yes. No, it's not limited to just properties. Yeah, I could put that whole show name, returns a string, you know, something like that. There's a little different way you typically will do. Let me leave it at that. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. There is a little more advanced thing you can do right there because sometimes it's going to return a more custom object, not just a string. So I can do that too. Yep. All right. So now notice down below, though, it's all broken because now it thinks that this guy doesn't satisfy show name. So it's all broken now. So we will fix that. All right. So there's even more. You can even, believe it or not, do generics with this. All right, so I literally can make, in fact, I have one. I'd have to go dig it up. But for this edX thing we did, we made a little recipe builder for the lab exercises that you can go through. And by the way, if you're interested in this edX, just go search for EDX TypeScript. It's totally free. I think they just started the latest class, so I'm not sure if you're able to get in now. But it's a, I don't know, like, has anyone done an edX one in here? I think it's like a 6-week or something, like program you go through, and then you can get an official cert. But it's free, unless you want the cert, to go through. But they actually have labs that we put together. And what you do is you actually have to, in order to get the points or whatever they do, you have to get forum, like peer review feedback. So you have to submit code based on what they say, because they don't give you the solution, actually. I was actually surprised. I'm like, they're going to figure that out? And they're like, yeah, because they post it on the forum, and if you're stuck, you'll get the peer review for the edX class to review your code. So it's actually a pretty cool way to learn. They have other courses, too. It's not just TypeScript. So if you're interested, though, there is a TypeScript one. It's free. All right. I would prefer, of course, that you go watch my Pluralsight one, but, you know, you could do this edX one, too. So, all right. How we doing on interfaces, classes? Any questions there?
Do you have abstract class?
Have what?
Abstract class?
No. They don't have that concept at this point. So abstracts are C# at this point, but I'm trying to think, no. I'm trying to think of a way you could kind of fake that, but no, it's just a class.
I'm just trying to see how much of the object model they put
Carries over.
here.
Yeah.
I presume that polymorphism would work. You could type employee as a person and still create a new employee.
You can even type cast. I could even downcast it. You know, that might be really dangerous, but it kind of looks like this, and then I'd have to do some more things. But it looks like generic tag,
Right.
but that's a casting syntax. So yeah.
Does it go before the game?
Oh yeah, that's true. You would. So it'd be right there actually. Have to cast. Well, and you might want to spell it right. Minor detail. Yeah, it'd be like that. So.
What's the light bulb?
You know, I don't even know that I've ever noticed the light bulb. Let's see if that's a new feature. I don't normally use this, obviously, for my dev. Oh, they're asking if you want to rename it to perform. I don't know why I do performance.
Some kind of refactor.
Yeah, I think it's a refactoring thing. They also added, I noticed, when you right-click, this is new.
Yeah.
They now have go to symbol, change all occurrences, format code. That's all new. It used to be you right-click and it would just show you the regular, you know, show source code thing. So they keep enhancing it. It's good stuff. Yeah, they totally didn't steal that from the WebStorm light bulb, not at all. Or the ReSharper, yeah.
Question. If you redefine show name on employee,
Okay.
is it going to try to keep the same signature? Or can you redefine it with a different signature?
You know, I'm not sure I even know. I think it'll override it. Fred instead of Ted, and then we'll call show name. So we're all set up for that, right? So let's run it, and I think it'll override, but I might be right. That one I'd have to just play with. Let's see what happens. No, it actually didn't.
Must have overridden because you overrode it and just said.
Oh, I didn't do an alert. Yeah. Now let's do an, oh yeah, thank you. I actually meant to do an alert. That's what I get for talking and typing at the same time. Yeah. So that's what I would expect, actually, because they're going to be doing a prototype that's a local prototype.
But what then happens if you change the signature? I'm missing
Let's take that offline because we'd have to play with that. Because otherwise we're going to go down a rabbit hole here. Yeah, the reason I was pretty sure that would work is because I'll tell you why. Because look what it did for show name. It's not on the person prototype, it's on the employee prototype. And the way prototyping works is it'll always look local first, and if it finds it, it calls it. If it can't, then it moves up the chain to the other prototype.
And I assume if you downcast that back into a person, when you make that call, you're gonna get Ted instead of Fred.
Let's try it. You guys are getting all technical now.
Right?
I don't think so, because it's dynamic dispatch. It's not.
So let's see what it does. Yeah, I'd have to play around with that one, but we'll run that one real fast. So let's see. No, we still got Fred. We still got Fred. Yeah, and the reason is this. That makes sense now that I think about it. This is purely a design time concept. Yeah, it's statically at design time. So yeah, that's true.
But that actually does make sense, that you would, even if you called it a person, just like polymorphism, you'd still get the classes.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that makes total sense now that I think about it, because JavaScript's going, I don't know what that is, so they filter it out. Yeah. Because in JavaScript, anything goes. All right. What time are we at here? About 10 after. What time are you guys usually? You take a break or stop now, or we can go? We got a little more to cover, but usually take a break.
We don't typically take a break. I don't know if you guys, it's up to you guys.
What time you usually go till? Just so I know.
30 is what we do.
Okay, so about 20 minutes max.
I don't even know.
Okay, cool. We'll be done by 10:30. So, all right. Let's do this then. Now you guys are dangerous, right? There's a lot more you can get. If you want to learn about generics or whatever, just go off to the handbook. I'll show you just really quick what that looks like rather than typing it. So there's not generic. There we go. Look at that. Now that's just on a normal function, by the way. That's not even related to ECMAScript 6. That's just JavaScript. But notice now that they're saying T or arg is an unknown type. So if you do generics in C#, you're going to look at this going, dang, that's pretty cool. We used the heck out of this in this app that we did because we had some scenarios where it's like, well, sometimes it's a number. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's this. So we'd use generics. Very, very cool. So that's even built in, and you'll notice it looks almost identical to what C# would do. So I'll let you guys read up. There's even more down here. Here's how you would call it. Check that out. How cool is that?
Sports multiple generic arguments.
Yeah, I believe so. I'd have to try that. I believe it does. I think so. I'm almost positive it does because I saw a dictionary once that had that. And so it must. I'd have to, those are always those things, it's like, I got to go look that up or try it because I don't do it every day. But yeah, I believe it does. They might even have it. Let's see if they even have an example here. Real fast. No, it's all single here. Okay. Yeah, I believe it does though. Yeah, and there's tons of other features I could show you guys that this has. Every release that comes out, they're introducing new things that move it even closer to full ES6 support, and that's one of my favorite features. The next version, this will blow your mind. ECMAScript 7, right? We don't even have support for 6 yet. I'll be retired by the time 7 supports in all the browsers, it feels like. It's going to have async await. Well, guess what TypeScript can build in today? Async await. So imagine writing code where you do promises and AJAX calls and all that. Instead of having nested callbacks like we do today, you literally could have an await on your AJAX call and then just assign it to the variable when it comes back, and it automatically generates the code, just like C# does, to make the async call. How cool is that? Now that's going to be, the roadmap's been published, TypeScript 1.6, which is the next release of TypeScript. So everybody see why it's kind of cool, because now I literally can leverage a feature that today is impossible to leverage in just pure JavaScript, because this is not there yet. Now it is possible, just as a quick segue, to do that with ES6. Has anyone used Tracer or Babel, the compilers, transpilers they call them? They are tools, Tracer's from Google. Babel's from one guy, and I think it's better than Tracer actually. And they have settings where you can actually do, they're kind of like experimental settings, but you can actually do async await now in Babel, I saw. So you could also write ES6 code, which looks like TypeScript without the types, and also do async await. But TypeScript's cool, especially if you use, I mean, I haven't even touched Visual Studio yet, but it's the same in Visual Studio. So, okay. So hopefully everybody has a pretty good idea about why I kind of like TypeScript. Just a couple more things, and then I'll wrap up here with a little Angular app to show you. So here's kind of the hierarchy. I didn't even show you modules. In fact, I'm going to, because I insist you see them. Which this little dude on Bing, he's pretty cute today. Look at that. He's cute, right? Girls, right? Is he cute? She's like, don't talk to me. Let me go to TypeScript lang, go to play.
Do you use brackets quite a bit still?
I do use brackets, yeah. I like it as my scratchpad editor. I don't use it as my biggie one, but for simple projects, yeah, I love brackets as prototyping and stuff. It's good. Now I'm kind of switching to the Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
It's faster.
Yeah. It runs a lot better on a Mac.
Yeah, I haven't tried it on Windows, but it runs really good on Mac. So, okay, let's do this just real fast to show you. I'm going to wrap what's called an internal module. Okay, so I'm going to do, let's say we work for Acme Corp. And we're going to wrap this module around all of this code here. Now notice employee is not there. So you'd probably, a module is like a namespace. Okay, so you'd probably think that, oops, I went the wrong way. You'd probably think you would do Acme Corp dot, but you'll notice I don't get employee, it still doesn't work. Okay, anyone know why? Yeah. I have to mark these as not private, or I guess you'd almost think of it as, in VB it was the old friend concept, but internal in C#. Kind of like that otherwise, or private, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and, I don't really need that guy per se, but export these. This is a C#, or I'm sorry, language dyslexia kicking in. This is an ES6 keyword that you can use. And now notice it's okay. Now this is pretty cool because now I can get types across modules, load the modules, and then there's even another technique I could do called external modules, where if I'm using Node.js, I can do a require statement to load the module with CommonJS it's called. Or if I'm doing AMD, asynchronous module definition, which is require.js, I can dynamically load scripts on the fly with these modules. Now it's a different technique for that. We're not going to have time to cover everything, unfortunately. But anyway, there's a lot of code out there to show that. So that's what a module is, just so you know. We would probably call it a namespace, you know, in the C# world. But you could do more than that if you do external modules. So the hierarchy kind of looks like this. Modules can have classes. Classes can have the fields I showed, the constructors. Properties, they just have a get set on the front of the property name. You literally put get, first name, brackets, set, space, first name, brackets, and the set takes a parameter that you would pass in. Okay, so you can do that. And then you saw interfaces here. All right, now there are some more language syntax features. I can do optional types. I can do all kinds of things where when I define a type, I could say it could be this or this or this. You could put pipes. So instead of just saying :string, I could say :string pipe number. And that would say it could be a number or it could be a string. So you can even mix up the typing and good stuff like that. All right, now I'll pull this up at the end again. What I'm going to show you guys to wrap up is just a quick Angular app. This is the one that we did it as a prototype for Microsoft. So I had been doing a lot of work with the Office 365 team lately. And another team called and said, hey, we want to do an Angular app with TypeScript, but you can't use Windows to make it. Which I'm like, you know, who's this calling? You know, this is Microsoft. And because, you know, they're trying to now get into the open source crowd, of course. And so that's what we did. I used brackets. Andrew used, what did Andrew use? WebStorm. Andrew used WebStorm. We separated editors on purpose because we wanted to make sure it worked. Now, we didn't have the benefit, though, of the auto-compilation. So the tool I'm going to show you, which is the top one here, or the app, is Angular in 20. It's a really simple Angular app, but it's a great way to learn, for those building Angular, how you could plug TypeScript into an Angular app. Plus, it uses a tool called Gulp. Gulp is a JavaScript task runner, if you're not familiar with it, that will take your TypeScript. You have a little console app, I'll show you in a sec, that I leave up. And every time I save a file, Gulp will auto-compile it into ES5. So it'll run. So let me show you that on my Mac side. All right, so first off, this is my main app TS file. So you'll see over here on the left, it's app.module.ts. Now, how many have done little wrapper functions to pull stuff out of the global scope? Probably a lot of you. That is the TypeScript way of doing it. I don't know if that's big enough. Let me see if I can, yeah, there we go. We'll go a little bigger, hopefully. Okay, so you'll notice there's the kind of Lambda syntax. So what is the first paren doing? No parameters. What's it return? Void. And then the Lambda is the nested function to call. Okay, so normally we would nest this in with the function keyword. Well, I'm just using a shortcut, what they call fat arrow syntax in ES6 world. Not required. If you look at this and say, that stinks, and I want to go back to the normal way, which kind of looks like that, I could do that too. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to go back for this one. Okay, now the rest of this is all normal Angular. I hope everybody looks at that and goes, yeah, that's pretty normal. I'm using the built-in route provider, but you could use anything. Now that you've seen that, let me just first, I think I have the app up. Okay, so you can get the app, the link will be in the book there, or the slides. But you can go to github.com/Dan Wahlin. Now you will be in the minority that know how to say my name, by the way. I always joke, the only country I've ever been to that says it right is Norway, because it's Swedish and it's like Wallin, you know, over there. Everyone says Waylon, Wallen. Now I'm just like, whatever. But anyway, it's like a Wallini. The Angular in 20 TypeScript is what I'm going to run. All the code's in here. All the usage of how to get it running is in here. So you just run through these steps. It does use Node under the covers. So I have Gulp already running. All right, now I want you to notice here, if we go in, I got to remember the hotkey on this. Who has a Mac? I always forget the Zoom key. It's, I thought it was option that. Oh, it is. Okay. All right, so notice up top, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I have Tracer and Babel running. These are tools that will convert to ECMAScript 5, basically. Those are doing some other things behind the scenes for this that aren't even needed here. What's also being done, though, is you notice that watch right there. What's happening is every single time I save a TypeScript file, it auto-compiles it as long as I leave this console up. Down. Now, right now, I stopped it, you can see. So I would have to come in and type gulp, hit enter, and local gulp found, oh, I'm in a different folder now. I screwed it up. Okay, hold on. Let's go, where am I? Dwallin? Yeah, so let's cd into desktop, ES6. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong project. Hold on, son of a gun. Give me a sec, and let's get into the right project. Okay, here it is. I don't know where that one came from. So let me open a new terminal tab here. There we go. All right, so if I do an ls here, you'll notice that I have this, package JSON and all that, but see that tslint and tsd.json? Has anyone heard of definitely typed by chance? Okay, it's definitely typed.org. The challenge as you work with TypeScript and you want to use jQuery, Angular, Ember, you name it, is if I don't have a way to say what those data types are, then TypeScript's only good for my code. It wouldn't be good as I call into Angular and all this other. So if you go to this website called definitelytype.org, they have this massive library. It's 300 plus scripts now, and they end with .d.ts, definition TypeScript. So it'd be angular.d.ts. They're type definition files. Now the reason I wanted to show you that is if I go back into brackets here, notice at the top I have this tsd.d.ts and TypeScript app.d.ts. All right, now these are files that I generate dynamically actually. They're in this tools folder, so let me open that. Look what these references are going to. Now you guys might recognize that syntax. That's from Visual Studio, right? But this works anywhere. What I'm doing is saying every time I reference the kind of container called, tsd.d.ts, it actually is loading all these. Now at definitelytype.org, I can get access to Angular, which is the core script, Angular route for routing, Angular animations, and then what else do I have? jQuery. jQuery was only needed for something else, not actually for the app per se. There is a dependency in the type definitions on the jQuery file. That's why it's being loaded. I'm not using jQuery though. So what does this buy you? Well, when it compiles, or if you put this line in Visual Studio, as you type Angular dot, you'll actually get full IntelliSense with type support against what you should be passing into the Angular or jQuery or Ember functions. They're like header or interface definition files of, hey, here's the interface for jQuery. Now just include that, and now as you type $parens, you'll get full IntelliSense against it, if your editor supports it, of course. I mean, how cool is that, that literally any library, Knockout.js, anyone use Knockout in here at all? Full IntelliSense against Knockout from a TypeScript app. Very cool. So anyway, I wanted to show that really quick. There's a little bit of setup info to make that all work, but at a minimum, you could run off to this definitelytyped.org site. Let me just show you really fast, and we'll run the app here and wrap up. This is the site. And they have a repository on GitHub where you can get all these scripts, and there's even a search directory. But they also have this tool called TSD. If anyone's ever used, Bower, NPM for Node, stuff like that to install dependencies, that's what this is. You can actually go to the command line and say TSD, and I think it's install Angular. And it will go grab the type definition file and put it in this little tools folder for you. Now I just have to put that / reference tag, and from then on, when I build, the compiler now will check my code against the definition file, and if I do something or pass something I'm not supposed to, then it's going to error, and I'll get an error with that. Now that's a whole, we could talk for probably another hour and a half, but I'm not going to do that to you, but on this, and it even shows right here at the bottom, you can see the jQuery reference. Extremely cool because, like I said, otherwise only your code would be useful. And while that's still cool, most of us are using some type of library or framework or whatever, unless you're one of those that likes to write everything from scratch, which is okay, but there are teams working on this stuff, so maybe we should use it. But the site is here, so I'll let you guys check that out if you're interested. Really, really cool stuff, though. And they have guides on how to make your own definition files and all that stuff. So you can even do this for your team, so that if they want to use your code, you could hand out a definition file. You can actually generate it. And now as like you use this definition file, you'll get it full IntelliSense, anywhere. And if they pass something inappropriate, it's going to let them know. Pretty cool. All right, so with that, let me wrap up by showing you a controller real fast, and then we'll try to run the app. I think I have a server going somewhere. Let me see where he's at. Yeah, okay, so let me see if, I think it's up and running, but let's try it. It was, until I went to the wrong command prompt. Okay, so let's go into localhost, I think it's 3474. Let's see if that's it. Okay, cool. So, very simple Angular site. But man, it's got cool animations, and that's all that matters, right? Okay, so I'll kind of zoom in. If anybody's saw or seen, I have a video up on YouTube. It's called, well, I have a 60-ish minutes one, but then I have another one that's 20-ish minutes. I'm trying to get it down to like one-ish, you know, Angular in 1 minute. Not going to happen, but you can filter pretty basic stuff. You can drill in to another view, go back. You know, it's not very advanced. But I did it on purpose for those that would like to gently break in to TypeScript and Angular. So let me open up a controller. And here would be an example. So there's that module I was telling you about. Notice I could still use ustrict if I want. That's cool to lock it down a bit. Here's my controller class. I mean, how clean is that? That's actually how, I didn't mention static, but you can do statics as well. In this, it will generate the appropriate JavaScript to simulate that, because JavaScript doesn't have a static. But that's my minification issue thing with Angular, where if you minify the scripts, your dependency injection can get messed up. So that's how you do it in TypeScript, real simple. There's my injector right there. So your constructor becomes where things are injected by default. And then notice I'm then using that injected customers factory to call get customers. Now notice the success there, because this is a very simple app, is not doing a nested callback function. It's using a Lambda. And if you've done this in C#, you'll know exactly what that's doing. But that's saving me, doing the function keyword and the parameters and all that. It's not that big of a savings, but it is cool. Here's why. This .customers. Anyone know what happens on a callback when you try to do that? This becomes the window object. Well, with this, and this is not a TypeScript feature, it's more of an ES6 feature, this gets preserved if you use a Lambda. And so now you don't have to worry about this changing context on you. It just auto fixes it. Okay.
Where this equals self.
Yeah, you can still do that. We were talking about that today. You can still do that, but that is actually a super good reason. I kept, as we were building this other app, I kept forgetting lambdas. I would keep doing function, and I'd get an error with the window object because this would change context. And I'd be like, come on, put a lambda. And then you put the lambda and the problem goes away. So very cool. So that's an ES6 feature. In fact, every feature I'm showing you besides types and interfaces, you can do an ES6 as well. Which is very cool. Generics, you can't do that either. But okay, so real simple. And then notice down here, we just plug it in, say controller, give it a name. I'm kind of doing a namespace name. And then I simply give it my class. Okay, let's look at a factory real fast, and then we'll wrap up here. I have a directive and stuff as well, but I'll let you guys look through it. Okay, here would be an example of, it's actually a service. Here's my constructor. There's that private. Okay, now where'd that guy come from? Well, remember this tsd.d.ts, say that 10 times, has the angular.d.ts inside of it, right? So what that ng.ihttp service comes from is actually the interface definition of whoever had way too much time on their hands to convert the Angular API into an interface. So now I don't have to do that, but by doing that, I'll get better IntelliSense. And I'll get errors as I build. All right, pretty cool. So notice I'm using the private here because I apparently was lazy and didn't want to type out this.http. And then we have our get customers, which simply uses the HTTP right here. How clean is that? Pretty clean.
You kind of breezed over the inject. Can you?
Yeah, inject is when you minify this, the JavaScript that's output, HTTP might be renamed to, Z.
Right.
And so, in Angular, we have to do either $inject or there's some other techniques you can do to tell it what is the actual name so that when Angular injects it at runtime, it'll look at that string right there.
Okay, so Angular then knows that's your list
Of parameters.
of dependencies.
Exactly. And so even if the one in the private right there gets renamed to Z, doesn't matter.
Okay,
At
it's
runtime,
for that variable.
exactly. Yeah, otherwise if you don't put the inject at runtime, Angular's going to go, I don't have a Z.
Yeah.
and it's going to bomb.
Right, yeah, I just didn't know that Angular picked up on the fact that there was a property that.
Yeah, that's what it's doing there. So I like it because you just put static inject and boom, you're done.
A little bit of magic.
Yeah, a little bit of magic. Yeah, for sure. Everything else below, it's the same. I'm able to use modules. That's pretty cool. So I have namespacing now, out of the box. I didn't have to put a global wrapper function around this one. And like I said, I won't go through it, but there's a little directive here, NGI directive implementation. I have a little simple template. This is the filter text box on the very exciting, where is that guy? On the very exciting home page of the app. So this guy's a directive. 34, 74, 73, close enough. Yeah, so this is just a simple directive that does the filter. And I put it in just so you could see. Directives, they were a little messier, I thought, to create. I talked to my buddy Jay at Intel, and he's like, what are you talking about? It's easy. And I'm like, yeah, it's easy once you know. But until you know a little trick, it's actually a little tricky. But I have an example of it. All right, so to wrap up here, here is the code for that app. So if you're, have nothing better to do this weekend, you could take a look at how to convert. I also have a JavaScript version of that same exact app, so it'd be pretty easy to see how to migrate. This bottom one is an app that Andrew and I worked on right here. Now that one, you won't be able to run it because to get it going, you have to set up Office 365 and Azure Active Directory, and you have to set up all this Azure stuff. And we don't have a README for that, and we're not going to make one because it's a little bit involved. Okay, but we went ahead and published it because there's a ton of TypeScript Angular code in that one. That one's much more real life. I won't say it's perfect. We only had less than 10 days to convert a JavaScript one I had to TypeScript, and it took us 10 days. So we had to cut a few corners here and there. So not everything is typed, for instance, but the important stuff is. So feel free to check that out. That has directives and controllers and factories and all that good stuff. So, all right, well, with that, I'll leave that up. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot away. But other than that, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. And